Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, welcome all to the Penn Corporate Innovation Summit 2023. Thank you all for being here from such an early hour despite your busy schedules. My name is Jin, and it is my great honor to be here as your MC today. This session was prepared to broaden insights into overall startup ecosystems, sharing the perspectives of global CVC entities on corporate innovation in response to the changes in the startup industry. I hope the session will be an opportunity for you to gain insights and ideas. Then, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the distinguished guests today. Please join me in welcoming them with a big round of applause as I call out their names. We have Mr. Michael Mo, the CEO of GSV Group. Mr. Boone, Managing General Partner of Symbol Capital Group. Mr. Roy Furman, Managing Director of Doral Energy Tech Ventures. Mr. Abhishek Bali, the Director of Dassault Systems. Mr. Gil Kim, Investment Manager of Applied Ventures. Ms. Karen Hui Ying Wang, Investor of Deutsche Bank CVC. Mr. Mitchell Weinstock, Venture Partner of HP Tech Ventures. Ms. Sarah Applebaum, Partner of Pangea Ventures. Mr. Dong-soo Kim, the CEO of LG Technology Ventures. Ms. Shelley Rao, the investor of Juniper Networks. And last but not least, Mr. Henry Sang, the CEO of Innovation Refinery. Then, without further ado, it is now time for us to listen to the keynote speech. I'd like to invite Mr. Michael Mo, the CEO of GSV Group, up to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please greet him with a big round of applause.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. It's your last year, and so it's wonderful to be back. Just quickly, some perspective on me and the firm I'm at, GSV, which stands for Global Silicon Valley. From day one, our firm's focus was how could we give everybody an equal opportunity to participate in the future, the foundation of which was getting access to quality education and knowledge. And so to do that, we have a variety of functions that we play at GSV. We have 6 offices around the world, including Silicon Valley, 4 in the United States, Paris, and Abu Dhabi. We have GSV Ventures, which is an ed tech-focused VC fund. We're on our 3rd fund. We've invested in 15 of the 30 unicorns that exist in the ed tech space, including companies like Guild and Learneo and ClassDojo. We have an annual summit in San Diego. We'd love to have all you come next year, April 14th through the 17th. 7,000 people come from 65 countries around the world. We'll have 900 education technology companies present at it. We also have an ed tech competition for startups, 800 competitors, $1 million in prizes. We have a virtual startup boot camp. We've had 10,000 entrepreneurs go through that over the last 3 years. We also have an online MBA, and we have a physical innovation center that's open in Dallas, Texas in 2024. We have investment publications. Our flagship is called EIEIO. I like to say that old McDonald had a farm, EIEIO. Well, new McDonald has a startup, EIEIO. It's about entrepreneurship, innovation, education, impact, and creating equal opportunity for all. So the state of the state in ed tech investing. So in 2010, the entire global ed tech venture capital was $500 million. By 2019, it grew to $7 billion, which is significant growth. And by 2021, it had gone to $20 billion, and last year, back to $11 billion. So still, even with coming back, still significant growth over the last nearly 15 years. Looking year over year from the second quarter of 2022 to the second quarter of 2023, down 72%. But again, context, that quarter was almost 50% greater than the entire year of fiscal year 2010, I mean. And by the way, that $500 million in 2010 was probably more than all the EdTech venture capital in the history of that industry. Looking at the activity of deals, almost up 10x to 1,400 in 2022. M&A has exploded, $8.5 billion of deals last year. And importantly, the characteristics and the geography of these companies is increasingly it's a global industry. So in 2010, 75% of all the EdTech funding was done in the United States. Last year, 2/3 was done outside of the United States. So this global Silicon Valley is really taking off. And in terms of the market, we're in a knowledge economy where education makes a difference not only for an individual, but for a company and for that matter, a country. This is evidenced by the number of students in higher education around the world. It's gone from 160 million in 2010 to expected to be 590 million higher ed students in the world by 2040. So just what's going on in the world around us, it's a scary time. You've had bank runs, Silicon Valley Bank going out of business. You had the Ukraine war with over 200,000 casualties. Goldman Sachs put out a report saying that there's going to be 300 million jobs lost from AI. COVID killed 6.8 million people over the last couple of years. The United States, you have significant racial division that continues. You have polarization in terms of political parties. In fact, 81% of Americans would prefer not to date somebody from the different political party. And that compares with 23% who wouldn't date somebody of a different religion and 15% that wouldn't date somebody from a different race. You have poverty around the world that still is just unbelievable in terms of its impact. 25,000 deaths per day from hunger. 771 million people without safe water. COVID learning loss was $28 trillion in lifetime earnings. You have over 100,000 deaths from opioids just in the United States in 2022 alone. You have nearly 700 million people around the world that are living at less than $2.15 per day. So all pretty daunting. Our former U.S. Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, said, for those that don't know history, everything is unprecedented. And my point with that is, as much as it seems like how could you even deal with all these issues, we've seen this movie before. If you were born 100 years ago, you had 600 bank failures per year in the United States. The Spanish flu killed 50 million people. World War I, we had 40 million casualties. And that was when there was just 1.8 billion people on Earth versus 8 billion today. You had KKK with 2 million members. If you were born in 1923, here's what you faced. You had the Great Crash in 1929. You had the Great Depression for the next 12 years. From 1930 to 1936, you had the Dust Bowl. You had World War II in 1941 to 1945. You had the atomic bombs. You had the Korean War. You had McCarthyism. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis. You had President Kennedy assassinated. You had the Vietnam War. You had Martin Luther King killed in Memphis. You had Bobby Kennedy killed in California. You had the oil crisis. You had Park Chung-hee assassinated here in 1979. You had hyperinflation, all within your first 50 years of living. So the point with that is you always face obstacles. There's always challenges, and yet it's been up and to the right, and that's our expectation as we look ahead. Not perfect, but progress. So compared to 100 years ago, people around the world are healthier, wealthier, and wiser. In the United States, life expectancy for a male has gone from 56 to 76 years old. In Korea, it's gone from 23 to 83 years old. Infant mortality rates dropped 93% in the United States. It's dropped 99% in Korea. The Dow Jones is up 36,000% in the last 100 years. GDP per capita is up over 10,000% in the United States. It's gone from $900 to $35,000 in Korea. And you've had high school graduation rates gone from 17% in 1923 in the United States to 86%. And then Korea has the highest high school graduation rates in the world, up to 97% from less than 1% 100 years ago. And in college education, you have 38% of US adults that now have a college degree, up from 5%. And in Korea, it's 70%, up from 0.13%. So again, a lot's happened in this last 100 years. So why all the worry? Media headlines just since 2000. Disgust is up 29%, polarization is up 30%, sadness is up 54%, anger is up 104%, fear is up 150%. Fear sells and everything is an existential threat. So here's some headlines from the iconic Time magazine. In 1980, it was about toxic waste. 1986, it was a nuclear meltdown. 1988, it was global warming. 1977, it was global cooling. 1999, the world was going to come to an end in 2000. Then in 2011, you had the China bubble. Then you had in 2017, China won. 2020, China done. Now you have the broken China. So one of the things that makes me really excited about being in Seoul right now is you had these different shifts in terms of what's going on in terms of opportunity and entrepreneurship and education. Korea is located in an incredible spot, one, because of its prioritization of education and technology, and secondly, what it can reach within a fairly short flight. So just as we think about Seoul as the gateway to the V-chips, by the way, are Vietnam, China, India, Indonesia, Philippines, and Singapore. It's a 9-hour flight from here to Dubai, 8-hour flight to Delhi. It's a 7-hour flight to Jakarta, 6-hour flight to Ho Chi Minh City, 6-hour flight to Singapore, 4-hour flight to Hong Kong, 4-hour flight to Manila, 2-hour flight to Shanghai, 2-hour flight to Tokyo, which makes this a fairly compelling place to reach a lot of where the world is going to be created for the future. As we think about this brave new world that we're now in, and we really do think that the coronavirus was a marker. We think it's so significant. We say there's BC before Corona, there's now AD after disease. In online learning, what this really happened is you had 1.6 billion students from around the world that were in March of 2020 instantly thrown in the deep end of the online learning pool and told to sink or swim. Some sank, some crawled to the edge of the pool, got out and said they're never going back in again. But many flailed around and sort of said they got the hang of it, and you've seen this major acceleration of the digital learning market. So the future effectively accelerated the present. So we had estimated before the coronavirus that digital learning was going to become a $1 trillion market by 2034. We now think it's a $1 trillion market by 2027. And what we also know is there's a direct correlation between your level of education and GDP per capita. So there's increasing emphasis on putting resources and commitment to see that for a country's progress. Just thinking again, the brave new world that we're in, the planet reached 8 billion people last November. And Time magazine said that 3 out of 10 kids born today will live to be 100 years old. By 2058, that's going to be 10 billion people. 10 mega trends that kind of shape our framework for how we think about this brave new world and where education technology is going to be benefiting. Number one, mega trend eastward ho. But for much of the world's history, it was all about the opportunity lied west. Increasingly, we think we're going to look east and south. Africa, for example, 41% of Africa's 1.1 billion people are under the age of 15 years old. By the way, 7 of the 10 fastest growing countries in the world last year were in Africa. Nigeria has 5.3 births per woman. Lagos alone is expected to be 40 million people by 2050. And you look at the Western world, it's a vanishing act. Part of that is because of births per woman, 1.5 births. You need over 2 just to keep constant. Japan and China, it's 1.2 births per woman. In fact, if you look at the aging population in Japan, Japan sold 2.5 times more adult diapers last year than baby diapers. Number 2 megatrend, always on. Average American spends 13 hours per day online, 3 billion gamers playing 2 hours a day. Number 3, the rise of the middle class. Asia will account for 78% of the global middle class consumption by 2050, 1.1 billion middle class Africans by 2060. Number 4 megatrend is getting rid of friction, friction-free. There's 5.7 billion people now on the internet. There's 6.5 billion people with smartphones. Number 5, smart everything. 55 billion people connected to devices by 2025. So you have smart homes, you have smartphones, you have smart drones, you have autonomous health, you have autonomous wealth, planes, trains, automobiles, all quicker, faster, cheaper, using autonomous technology and being saving time. Number 6 megatrend, data rules. The definition of the data rule: he who has the data makes the rules. Data is the new gold. The old corporate balancing and industrial economy, property, plant, and equipment were what mattered. In the new knowledge economy, it's the new balance sheet. It's about human capital and data. Number 7, free market. Looking at how you create connections between creators and consumers. 62% of Gen Z intends to start their own business. And one of the things that's amazing in this friction-free world is a lot of these tools that they can use to start their business are free to them. So it's 10,000 times cheaper to launch a startup today than it was in 2000. Number 8 megatrend, the power of women. POW. A lot of data around this, but last year nearly 50% of new startups were by women. Boy, 62% of college students are women, which if you want to see the future in the knowledge economy, that tells you a lot. 85% of consumer spending is influenced by women. Number 9 megatrend, the global Silicon Valley, the name of our firm, which is we saw as this mega shift going on, the mindset of innovation, entrepreneurship that's made Silicon Valley such a remarkable place, spreading throughout the world. And so some of the data for this, from Austin to Boston, from Chicago to Sao Paulo, from Mumbai to Shanghai to Dubai, that's the global Silicon Valley. Looking specifically here, Japan, venture capital funding in the last 10 years is up 300%. In Korea, it's up 389%. Philippines, 500%. Vietnam, 1,000%. Indonesia, 1,700%. India, 3,000%. China, 4,500%. All within that quick flight that we talked about before. Just in terms of how a number of things happen that didn't happen before, is people typically have a tough time seeing things that haven't existed. So for example, when Airbnb came out, what everybody said about them was, people never share a house with a stranger. Well, Airbnb's market cap today is $71 billion versus Marriott, Hyatt's, and Wyndham combined is $68 billion. Another conventional wisdom: people never date somebody they met online. Well, 55% of couples in 2021 met online versus 15% through friends. AirPods will make you look like a dork when they came out in 2018. Well, in 2020 revenue, that was $23 billion versus Cartier, Ralph Lauren, and Rolex, $21 billion. So again, conventional wisdom has a way of being defeated with innovation. And here's another one: Google owns search. And then comes ChatGPT, the fastest adoption of a technology in the history of the world, and all conventional wisdom has been thrown out the window. So as we look at the future, human capability is basically on a linear path, and technology is on an exponential path, and we're here. So what this means is that it's not only that blue-collar jobs are at risk and white-collar jobs are at risk, but no-collar jobs are at risk too from AI. And so some of this, I think, is actually very, very powerful. I think there's jobs where technology can make it, where it gives people the opportunity to do things where they can actually apply their brains and their heart and have progress for their lives. But there's things where technology is never going to replace, like the empathy of a nurse. And so I like to say about AI, I think it's absolutely transformational, but it's not necessarily everything that people give it credit for. So I like to say, as a horse that can count to 10 is a remarkable horse, but it's not a remarkable mathematician. And so how we see the future evolving with this brave new world is you have a software layer, then you have an AI layer, but on top of that you have a smart layer, and that's human intelligence interjected into it. And so software is eating the world, as Mark Andreessen famously said, but AI is its teeth, but people decide what to eat. And so as my friend Bill Campbell said, when we have facts, we'll use facts. When we have opinions, we'll use mine. And those opinions are going to matter more and more, I think, as we go ahead. So as the more and more content is AI generated, the more it becomes a commodity, and the best opportunities will always be on the edge. Good is gone, great isn't enough, outstanding is the future. And I think that's wildly exciting for humanity. So it's not man versus machine, it's man and machine. And so if you look at the last 30 years in terms of innovation and technology, it was really that movie, Revenge of the Nerds. Those who had all the engineering and math and skills, they created the future. I think as we look ahead, I call it back to the future. And it's really those Renaissance skills that I think are more and more going to be in demand and creating value. So I like to say, as we think about this map that we're trying to create, in particular a learning map for this new world, you can't use an old map for a new world. We're definitely in a new world, so you can't use this old map. And so thinking about what are the things that people are going to need to know or master or be exceptional at to not only participate but thrive in this new world that we're going. I call it the 7 C's of learning. So I should have been into this visual so you could see the 7 C's. But the first is critical thinking. The second is creativity. The third C is communication. And by the way, with 6 minutes to go, I'm not going to go through examples of this because I want to cover the whole talk. Number 4 is cultural fluency, but just an example of this. If you go to the Middle East and you cross your legs in the Arab world, that's like doing this in America. So you got to know the culture. You have cultural literacy in terms of what you can do and what you can't do. Civic engagement. Number 6C is collaboration, working as a team. One of the things, interesting studies about people's happiness at work, Laura Santos did a bunch of research as being part of a team and that team winning. Number 7 is character. And as Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy all day long. And so as we kind of go into 10 investment themes for education, the overriding theme that we look at, and I think is what you're going to see the mega companies created, we call it ROE, return on education, equals ROI, or return on investment. So 10 learning themes to close with. Number 1 is live and learn. And this is this idea that you're no longer going to just basically learn up to age 25 and then go off through life. So you're no longer going to fill up your knowledge tank to age 25 and go off through life. You're going to continually need to be learning things on an ongoing basis. For a data point around this, 85% of the jobs in 2030 don't exist yet. So if you learn the technical skill and the world is changing as fast as it is, you have to be an ongoing lifelong learner just to be relevant. The example of a company that's going to help fuel these learners on an ongoing basis, Coursera, which we were fortunate to be an investor in, 124 million learners on its platform, most of them that access that learning for free. Eruditus, 250,000 students on its platform in 80 countries. Number 2 theme, knowledge is a currency. It's what you know, not where you go. It's about knowledge, not college. It's how you apply your skills. And that's not to replace the degree, but the degree used to be the old currency that gave you a ticket to opportunity. That's going to be augmented by other ways you're able to represent what you know and what you're capable of. And that artificial intelligence is going to help that quite a bit. Less than 5% of all roles at AT&T today require a college degree, and that's a trend you're seeing in all major companies. 53% of the Fortune 500 says they need to be reskilled by 2028. Degree is another company that plays in this whole knowledge economy theme. It's used in 1 in 3 Fortune 50 companies today. Number 3 theme that we like is we call it unbundling the college degree. This is the way that you're able to create kind of a bespoke representation of knowledge that you possess. You're able to acquire this knowledge, like what I say is a Spotify playlist, which will be the next slide. But 56% of Americans don't believe the degree is no longer worth the time and money So think about that Spotify playlist, picking and choosing the songs that you want and the podcasts that you want that represent your taste and what you're trying to accomplish. From a tuition to subscription, we think that's the future of learning. 2U is a company that's an example of this. It has 74 million learners on its platform. Number 4 theme, RoboEd. This is artificial intelligence integrated in the learning experience, becoming more customized or tailored for you with every single click, knowing how you best learn, what you know, where you're proficient, and accelerating you, where you're deficient, going back. All that is the future of learning. Learneo is a company that represents this 115 million pieces of study content. You know, the most known product is Course Hero. Photomath, 24 billion problems solved each year for students. Taking your phone, taking a picture of the math problem, and instantly coming back not only with the solution, but the ways you get there. And if you need your own AI tutor, you can get that too. Speak, 15 million lessons started annually. Number 5 trend is autonomous learning. This is the idea that basically learning on a just-in-time basis. iLearning engines, ChatGPT for the enterprise, 58 increase in content consumption. As we hear over and over again, if you are in an area where you can't have hallucinations, having a focused content engine is critical. Gong, another example of this, 481% 3-year ROI for sales. Number 6 theme, higher ed, H-I-R-E-Ed. This is the idea that historically education and work were individual silos. Increasingly, we see those integrated together. 93% of college students' number 1 priority is to get a job. Only 15% of college professors think that students' number 1 priority is to get a job. So there's an inconsistency and an opportunity. Multiverse, 85% of completion rate for entrepreneurships or for apprenticeships. Number 7, invisible learning. This is just learning in your natural flow of living. Games is a great example of this. Twitch, 22.4 billion hours watched in 2022. Roblox, 50 billion hours spent per year. So learning by doing things you want to do. Games is a great example. Duolingo, doing terrific. 6.5 billion market cap, learning languages by playing games. Kahoot, very cool brand. Dreamscape Learn, revolutionary in terms of what it's doing. Number 8, news to knowledge. This is the continuum between short-term learning, called a newspaper article, to a documentary, to a conference you might attend, to a micro course, from free to degree. Just gonna get through this quick. Number 9, mind, body, and soul. This is education of your whole being. Calm, 25% decrease in depression and anxiety for 8 weeks. Noom, 78% of people have lost weight using that. Hallow for prayers, 100 million prayers a day. Number 10, education is a benefit. And this is the idea of being able to provide this like a healthcare benefit at work. Guild is a leading example of this, and Stride is another one. And number 10, Mission Corp. And this is where I'll end. I wrote a book a couple years ago called Mission Corporation, which is this idea that the great businesses of tomorrow are going to have the ambition of a for-profit and the heart of a not-for-profit. And this is what we're seeing, combine purpose and profits. Now, Mark Twain said the 2 most important days of your life, the day you were born and the day you find out why. And so what we think is that there's going to be meaning that's created through learning and purpose through work. We look for 5 P's in a company, and the 5th P is purpose for the great companies of tomorrow. So combining purpose and profits, we call this values investing. And we look for companies that combine both hearts and smarts. And we think that that's the critical ingredients for really sustainable and exceptional growth. And so when you look at all the problems with learning, people say, there's all this complexity, you knock one problem down and 3 pop up, and they say there's no silver bullet. But I actually do think there's a silver bullet to how we can have it, go back to the first slide, how we give everybody an equal opportunity to participate in the future. That is, the silver bullet for education is love. If we love our neighbors, we love ourselves. I believe, and we put a focus and a prioritization on that, I believe many of these challenges I talk about can be solved, and education really is going to be the foundation of it. So with that, again, I'm delighted and thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful and insightful speech, Mr. Mo. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move on to the panel discussion session. But before diving right in, we'll have our moderator deliver his speech first. I'll be inviting him just in a minute as soon as the stage is prepared. Meanwhile, I'd like to give a brief introduction on the moderator and the panelists of the session today. I believe that the stage will be ready soon. So, for the moderator today, we have Mr. Christopher Boone, the managing partner of Symbol Capital. And as our panelists, we have Mr. Roy Furman, the managing director of Doral Energy Tech Ventures, and Mr. Abhishek Bali, the director of Dassault Systems, Mr. Gil Kim, the investment manager of Applied Ventures, and last but not least, Ms. Karen Hui Ying Yang, the investor of Deutsche Bank CVC. I'll invite them in person as soon as the stage is ready. We request for your understanding and patience. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience. I believe the stage is now ready, so I'd like to invite our moderator, Mr. Christopher Boone, the managing partner of Symbol Capital Group, up to the stage for his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please greet him with a big round of applause.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christopher Boone. I'm the managing partner of Symbol Capital Group, a technology-focused private equity firm based in the United States in Silicon Valley. On behalf of my entire team, thank you very much for your time today. This is my first trip to Seoul. It's been an honor to be here discussing the opportunities around global technology innovation and the investment opportunities we see ahead. I want to offer a special thanks to Penn Ventures again for this unique opportunity. Symbol Capital is a private equity firm comprised of 4 partners with collectively over 100 years of experience in technology investing, operations, educated with esteemed institutions including MIT, Wharton, Harvard Business School, Carnegie Mellon, and having worked at companies including Google, Motorola, HP, NASA, yes, Tolga was in fact a rocket scientist, and JP Morgan. Looking at the market, the venture market peaked in 2021 with over $330 billion invested. Despite that exuberance, the statistics behind venture investing prove the idea of very high risk often equates to very high return. But with 75% of venture-backed companies failing, meaning they're returning $0 to their investors, that's nearly $250 billion in lost capital. And when a company fails, what happens to the tens of billions of dollars that have been invested in that research and development? More often than not, those technologies are orphaned, put on a shelf and no longer supported. That inefficiency is the basis of our investment thesis. Repurposing novel technology into industries where it will solve significant problems for which it was never intended. We invest across nearly all sectors, often seeking to repurpose technology into enterprise software, but sourcing initial technologies from an assortment of industries. And with that thesis, our fund returned an industry-leading 39.7% IRR after fees. A few examples of our thesis at work. Coveroo, which was a consumer product company we acquired, we sold off the manufacturing business and turned their design software into an enterprise trademark management system, which we licensed to Major League Baseball, the NBA, NHL, NCAA, and then later sold to Major League Baseball. Vesuvi was a consumer image analytics technology designed as an advertising technology for consumer images. We repurposed that into a medical imaging technology based on machine learning to help detect cancer in pathology slides, and later sold that to Siemens. We are proud to work with leading venture firms and corporations, including Intel, Cisco, Google, HP, and IBM, to help source our acquisitions, and we welcome the opportunity to partner with the global firms represented here today to help realize greater value in your technology investments. And with that, I'd like to invite our panelists to join me on the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Boone, for the wonderful speech. Now then, without further ado, I'd like to invite our our panelists up to the stage. We have Mr. Roy Furman, the Managing Director of Doral Energy Tech Ventures. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. And next, we have Mr. Abhishek Bali, the Director of Dassault Systems. Next, we have Mr. Gil Kim, the Investment Manager of Applied Ventures. And last but not least, we have Ms. Karen Hui Ying Wang, the Investor of Deutsche Bank CVC. Okay. Thank you all for being here once again. Mr. Boone, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So it's an honor to have you all here today. Thanks so much for your time. And again, thank you all for being here. I'd like to start just with a brief introduction. If each of you could, for the benefit of the audience, provide an overview of your firm's primary focus, what you do within that, what you do in terms of corporate venture investing, the types of technologies that you're looking in, and then because this is a global audience, how you look to integrate those global solutions into your respective offering.
Okay, I can start.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Abhishek Bali. I manage 2 programs for Dassault System. You might know Dassault System is a huge French company, and we make 3D design software starting from CATIA, SolidWorks, Simulia. So these are the softwares that are used for design, engineering, simulation, and data intelligence. So the 2 programs are, the first one is called 3D Experience, works for startups, and I am the global director of this program. Every month, over 600 hardware startups apply to this program. And in fact, 28 of them applied just yesterday while I was at the day 1 proceedings of this conference. And the other program is called 3D Experience Lab, which is just like a high decibel program within Dassault Systems. It's an accelerator. And we take just 15 to 18 companies that are solving a tough technical problem around sustainability. So these are the 2 programs. And the whole idea is to how to make our amazing tools accessible for bottoms-up innovation, startups and innovators just like you.
Thanks. Very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for Penn Ventures and TryEverything for the invite. My name is Roy Furman, and I came from Israel. We are based in Tel Aviv. I'm heading the corporate venture arm of Doral Energy. Doral Energy is a global renewable energy developer. So the mothership is developing renewable energy projects. It's quite unique in our landscape because the mothership is a project developer, which means we do not have any R&D practices in-house, and we engage with technologies and invest in technologies. And it by itself is not trivial. So our activities at Doral Tech is divided into 3 main pillars of innovation. The first one is very strong ties with universities, where we built our universities network alongside some of the leading universities in Israel, the Technion, which is the Israeli MIT, Bar Ilan University. We sponsored some applied research programs under the idea to generate new IP that later on we can spin this off and do venture creation, to build new startup on top of that. We also funded the energy and sustainability center within one of the universities in Israel. And the idea is to promote and incubate new and new IP, but with the mindset of collaboration from the get-go with the industry, not just to promote science, but to make it more applied research. The second one, we started to build a lot of infrastructure in the ecosystem, dedicated accelerator program for energy and climate tech, bootcamp for more mature stage companies, bootcamp for ideation, and the idea is to follow companies and entrepreneurs throughout this, their journey and endeavors. And the third is equity investments in startup. We have 17 companies in our portfolio in less than 3 years of operation, investing in Israel, Europe, the US, maybe in Korea. And this is in a nutshell about ourselves. The thesis is around climate and energy tech innovation, where we can either integrate technologies within our projects or to develop new businesses on top of emerging technologies. And I can give examples down the line.
That's great, thank you. Gil, how about yourself?
Morning, everyone. My name is Gil Kim from Applied Ventures. Applied Ventures is a corporate venture arm of Applied Materials. Applied Materials is the world's largest semiconductor equipment, display equipment manufacturer based in Santa Clara in US. Given our parents' mothership is focusing on the semiconductor manufacturing process, our investment thesis around from material to system plus software and application stack within semiconductor application and also in display sector. For the deep tech technology transplant into our DNA within Applied, we often try to have a joint development agreement in addition to investment when we invest into the startups, so that the core technologies of the startups cannot be just sitting on the shelf. We actually can use or we can enhance by collaborating with our mother company, or we can connect with our customers, we can connect with our supply chain, and so on and so forth. So we, as a corporate venture arm, not only for the financial investment, capital injection as investment, but also we try to start up to cross the chasm by helping the manufacturing process and the know-how channel and the access to the global market. Korea has been a great partner in terms of our investment. In terms of the number of investment we made, Korea is the second largest country after US. So it's very honored to be here to share our insights and share our learnings and experience how our deep tech transplant strategy can be fit within the broader deep tech ecosystem.
Thanks, Gil. How about Karen?
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Wang. I'm an investor at Deutsche Bank CVC. I'm based in New York. Deutsche Bank invests in enterprise software companies that are Series A and above. We typically look at AI, ML, data, cybersecurity, ESG, HR, topics that are on the infrastructure side that a bank would use. In addition to making these investments, we also have an entrepreneur in residence program, which is a program that enables pre-seed and seed stage startups to work with Deutsche Bank to co-develop a product. And that means, Deutsche Bank would use the product and make an investment into the product. And that's how it is implanted with the bank's strategy. We're actually using the product because we're developing it together jointly with a startup. The team is based in New York and Germany, and our typical check sizes are 3 to 5 million.
Fantastic, thanks, Karen. So as you look at your portfolios, and since this is a global audience, can you give some examples of some global technologies that you've invested into and then incorporated into the operations?
Yeah. So first of all, we are investing in climate technologies, and climate change is no boundaries. So we definitely see the global efforts towards developing and promoting climate-related technologies across the globe, from innovation and up until investments. So, for example, we started building the thesis around renewable molecules in the form of green hydrogen, green ammonia, and so forth. The mainstream business of Doral up until 2 years ago and continued to moving forward was around renewable energy, solar energy, solar PV, wind connected to the grid. But we definitely identified the wave of the green molecules, like in the form of green hydrogen, for example. And we started investing and building the thesis. So we invested in some global companies from the US and also in Europe that are developing various kinds of electrolyzer technology. And the idea is to split water into generate hydrogen, green hydrogen. So, for example, Verdagy from Moss Landing, California, and Reverion from Munich, and H2 Pro from Israel, this type of investment that we've done. And later on, we educate our business units in our mothership on the new opportunity of renewable molecules as a project developer mindset. So instead of allocating the electrons that we produce in our solar assets, we can transform them into green molecules for other decarbonization purposes. Now, it's quite marvel and exciting to see how the global investment community support these companies. So we co-invested with companies from Singapore, from here, from Korea, like GS, like SK, and also Shell, the Dutch companies, the BHP from Australia, us from Israel, financial funds from the US, and you can definitely see how the world is getting together in order to promote these technologies. And we're pretty excited about it. So the way that we integrate these technologies later on is when we create these connections with the business unit, and then Doral has became another business development angle to as a project developer to bring these technologies that we invested in into real world setting, into projects.
Exciting to hear. Congratulations.
Yeah, so we don't invest in the traditional sense, but the value in kind model that we have seems to be attractive to a lot of startups. That's why we've had 18,000 startups, hardware startups, actually go through the program. And the very first year, we give them access to our software, which is worth $90,000. And it's the gold standard when you talk about 3D design and engineering. It's called SolidWorks. So some of the examples are companies like, you might have heard about Boom Supersonic, that's trying to, or not trying to, but they are on their way to making supersonic flight commercial. So they got around $700 million of funding, and they already have contracts signed with United Airlines, American, and Japan Airlines. So they came to the program around 5 years ago, and now they are a successful company. Similarly, there's a company called Spark Charge based out of Boston. I'm also basically based out of Boston. I forgot to mention that. But when they came to us, they just had an idea to recent graduates from Syracuse University. They wanted to create or design portable battery chargers for electric vehicles. So using our software, when they got into the program, they built it successfully, and now they're a $110 million company. In fact, Mark Cuban and Laurie, they invested in the company. They won at Shark Tank. And in fact, the CEO, Josh, he was the person who introduced President Biden in the White House when President Biden was about to launch the new CHIPS Act. So these are two examples, but globally, there's so many companies from across the world, including some of them in Korea, that apply to the program, and the value in kind that we give through the program, basically it's a huge benefit, because the first year is free, second year is 70% off, and third year is 50% off. And then we take them to CES, VivaTech, TechCrunch. So there are multiple levels how we help them.
Fantastic. Gil, how about yourself? Karen?
Right. So it's really hard to not mentioning AI these days. Mr. Mo also gave us a keynote speech a few minutes ago, and yesterday's keynote speech, both of them were talked about the Gen AI, and that it's the same for even for semiconductor manufacturing processes. We as a focused on the hardware equipment provider, but we also have an investment thesis around AI and Gen AI era. Because of the hype of AI and machine learning algorithm, we are actively looking into the startups across the multiple countries across the global who can bring their core technology within AI capability into the semiconductor manufacturing processes. I can give you 3 examples. 2 are our portfolio companies. One are one of our pipelines. One is developing the machine learning algorithm for the anomaly detection within semiconductor manufacturing process and optimization and false alarm predictive maintenance applications. And we adapt that technology into our manufacturing system so that the AI can detect the false alarm or predict when the tool can down ahead of the curve. And the second example is the metrology. Metrology is a huge step within the semiconductor manufacturing process. We conventionally leverage so many different sensors and so many different tools that detect potential defects on the wafer and finally chips. Now, we are looking into a company that provide a virtual metrology system that doesn't require the humongous equipment, but rather than a small number of sensors, and they develop the AI algorithm to have a similar or even better accuracy when it comes to the metrology and inspection step. The third one is a AI algorithm provider for simulation and modeling, which can help engineers to reduce their simulation time significantly. So conventional AI engineer or non-AI engineers could take 5 days or 7 days for the simulations, but this tool can provide in 2 minutes of simulation results.
Impressive.
Impressive.
Yeah, thanks, Gil.
Generative AI is such a hot topic right now. At Deutsche Bank, AI is very top of mind. We recently made an investment into a generative AI company. It's not been publicly announced. It was just recently completed. And this company actually went through our Entrepreneur in Residence program. So they worked with us from the beginning, and initially they had one idea, and we introduced them to several internal stakeholders to test that hypotheses and their idea. What ended up happening was they decided to pivot their product based on the feedback that they got from our stakeholders. So their company focuses on generative AI for financial institutions, and their use cases are super niche. They are saying that the big companies won't take these use cases because they're so niche, and that's why they're targeting them. It's been a success from our perspective because we are working with these startups, helping them, giving them subject matter expertise, and then they can provide their expertise on the technology, and they're building a product for us. And the idea is if it works at Deutsche Bank, it would work at the other banks as well.
That's a great. So Karen, I'm just curious, since you're offering both investment and some commercialization with that, are there restrictions with a company coming in and working with Deutsche? Are they, for example, allowed to have a similar relationship with a JP Morgan Chase or a Citi or a Wells Fargo, US Bank, what have you?
So we welcome the startup to work with all financial institutions. We don't have any restrictions on them because we want them to grow. If they grow, it would help us as well.
Fantastic. Great to hear. Thank you.
But I do want to say one thing, or at least sort of advice to startups that engage with corporates. I think that as long as the entrepreneur is really clear about the ask, what is it that he's looking for from the corporate, it would be very easy on the corporate to support him. And we try to switch the discussion with the startup instead of what is that we need, but more of how can we best serve you to demonstrate and showcase your technology and reach to the next either inflection point or proving or de-risking of the tech or what have you. And this is something that I think it's really, really important. Also, if you want to engage with a corporate, not necessarily for investment, but more of a discovery call because you are working on your product market fit or you want to have some advice, it's okay, it's totally fine. You just need to frame it and to manage expectations from the get-go, and you will find that there is a lot of good people around the table that would love to support you. Also, there are different approaches on how to interact with corporates. Some of them, and sometimes the innovation departments and the venture departments are very good early point to incorporate. But from the commercial aspect, if you're trying to do more on the commercial side, sometimes go directly to the business unit will serve you better, and trying to identify how the corporate is serious about you by having the discussion directly with the owners or the counterpart that the day after investment or even regardless of investment will be the ones that working with you. And I think it's really, really important because sometimes you can enjoy, I would say, this flirting discussion with the corporate, but not necessarily with the right shareholders and stakeholders within the organization that de facto will be the ones that working with you on hands-on. And I think it will be really, really important for you guys to distinguish between, and especially when it goes to very large corporations, to identify from the get-go that you're not wasting the time on the irrelevant departments. And it's all good, it's just a matter of communication. And especially when there are some corporations with some different culture backgrounds or different DNAs, I think that as long as you are clear on what you are up to achieve and what would like to achieve from the corporate, it will ease on all people involved in the discussion.
Great point. Could you guys each share one great success story within your portfolio, maybe even if it hasn't been realized yet, but getting new funding, getting new partnerships, what have you? But then in the interest of being fair, and since we all know that 75% of venture-backed companies fail, can you share a company that was a failure? And in both cases, what did you learn?
Sure. I mean, I think for me it's an amazing week because we just announced on our first unicorn in our portfolio. I think it was the end of last week.
Congratulations.
The company, thank you. So in 2.5 years to have one unicorn with, I think, 4 upfronts since we just invested, it's great. It's a great achievement. So Ascend Elements, it's a company that doing, it's an advanced materials company that recycle lithium-ion batteries and produce new active materials for batteries during their processes. So we have amazing investors, also from Korea, by the way, SK Ecoplant. And so decarbonization partners, Temasek and Qatar Investment Authority led their Series D, and we just now reached the status of unicorn. And this is something that I can share with you very modestly, but that we constantly underestimated the market when we just invested. And sometimes you have good surprises. So and in this climate and energy tech landscape, I think that the general year of 2023, at least from our perspective, was quite a good year because the geopolitical game and the governmental tailwind and support that the Inflation Reduction Act and the Department of Energy in the US and REPowerEU, so lots of governmental incentives into the space that provide a lot of support to companies. So from our portfolio, we have quite several companies this year that did some amazing up rounds. Learning that we had on a company that was less successful was more on our venture creation activities. Sometimes the corporate wants us to develop like new idea and to incubate a new technology or a new commercial activities. And the thing that we've learned that sometimes what we didn't walk through is throughout the entire process of validating this idea as we evaluate startup.
Yep.
So we did some shortcuts, because there was a tremendous push from the business unit. But in practice, when we wanted to create this as a company, it was a mistake to not evaluate it as a startup. So there was quite a few lessons learned from this one.
Great. How about the end? How about Karen? Given you're a very regulated industry.
One successful startup that we have in our portfolio is in the HR space. The company is called Skyhive. What they do is they take a look at your workforce and tell you, okay, your employees have XYZ skills, but right now, these are the new skills that they should learn. And they help you evaluate first what skills your employees have, and then how your employees can improve and learn new skills. So we made an investment into them, and with our funding, we also like to be a client of theirs. So now we're also using it at the company. And I think that shows, a lot of value of, first, we're giving you investment, but also we're bringing you into the bank and providing you that opportunity to work with large corporates. That way you learn what you can do to improve your product. In terms of company that did not work as successfully, a previous EIR company, entrepreneur in residence company that joined us, we did not make an investment into them because we realized that their product they wanted to do to consumer first, and we're enterprise focused. So I think that even while we did not make an investment, we learned from that process, from the beginning, what we need to set in order for us to decide, is this successful or not?
Terrific. Gil?
From our perspective, when it comes to a success story, it's pretty much, like I mentioned, joint development agreements. We want our investee startup to bring the new technology or new device structure so that our tool can be enhanced or upgraded or improved to accommodate those innovative idea or concept. So what it happens to both entities, startup can leverage our capability to commercialize their seed idea. But for applied perspective, we can, add or augment our product portfolio by serving this startup's idea, and we can have a new product line that can, in the end, generate the new revenue line. So that's our best case playbook that we want to explore when it comes to an investment decision. When it comes to failure, I think timing is one lesson we learned. I assume that everybody is learning that when is the right time to invest. The technology is so cool, team is so wonderful, but timing sometimes doesn't work. And then it needs decades. Some people says it requires a village or community to build those startup into a successful story, but sometimes it takes more time. And then as a strategic investor, just putting into a equity investment is not something we can do well, but rather we can endure, we can trust, and we can leverage our own capability to make our investee startup to be successful by providing a lot of different angles in addition to the investment.
Fantastic, thanks. Amshad?
Yeah, so very quickly. So because we come, at I would say, the upstream of this whole process. So I was just looking at my phone, not playing, crunch, like whatever. But basically, I just received an email that one of our startups, ex-Sun, they just became the first European company to be verified as a fixed wing drone, by the European Union Aviation Safety to actually circle around the Earth and collect data. So these instances are success for us, and not only that, then there are companies like CellLink, which is actually 3D printing human cells. So using our technology, they designed and simulated their printers, and now they are a big company, and now they're called BICO. There are companies that have not worked, although the ideas were great, but there's so many factors because hardware is definitely hard. So there's a company called Digital Orthopedics that was actually taking the scan of the human leg and human foot and using CATIA and Simulia for simulation and trying to predict how well a performed surgery would do in 5 years. But these are some of the companies are in such difficult sectors. There's so many ecosystems that they overlap. It was difficult for them to maybe sustain. But yeah, it's always a mixed bag.
Terrific. So in the last 90 seconds, technology markets tend to operate through cycles in roughly 3 to 5 year cycles. So we're in a bit of a lull right now on the exit side, right? With a high interest rate environment, not a lot of M&A activity, not a lot of IPO activity for exits. But when do you see that turning around? When do you see that making a change and getting more bullish? Is that in the next 6 months, the next 18 months?
Maybe I can kick off. I cannot predict 6 months, 18 months, but I have a faith that at least within the industry that I am currently working in, which is semiconductor industry, will go up to the right side of the angle. The market has grown from few billion to 500 billion for the last 70 years. And we have a consensus, everybody understands that for the next 7 years, the market will double up the size.
Impressive.
So right now, like a lot of people have capital, right? So people are trying to deploy. I mean, at least at Deutsche Bank, we are trying to deploy. So I think that the market is going to look up better in the next 18 months.
I think that's generally speaking, it's really, really, really hard to anticipate the market. So as long as you have a good company, a good product, you execute very, very well. Sometimes testing the water is a good approach to see if the market reacts or not. And as I see it, I mean, as long as when we will start seeing the shifting in interest rate goes slightly down, then I think it will open up. I guess from our colleague, the assumption is somewhere in the realms of 12 months-ish. So not 6 and not 18. But again, focus on good execution and great companies, as we definitely see, will always be great companies. You maybe have slightly less valuation or it takes more time to fundraise. This is definitely true. But don't try to predict and anticipate the market because it's really, really tough to do that.
Yeah. So you're running the most successful hardware program, I would say, around startups. So when SVB bank thing happened, we could see a decline in the number of applications. But now they are back. And what I see is that more high-tech companies are coming, robotics, industrial automation companies, they are actually growing. So we see this growth within a 6-month kind of a cycle. But whatever you say, hardware companies are solving tough problems, and they are integrating AI and data elements into it. So I think this trend will keep continuing.
Great point. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the enlightening session where we could share valuable insights and perspectives. Thank you once again, and you may now all return to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we will now have a 10-minute break before proceeding to the second part of the discussion session. We look forward to your active participation during the upcoming session as well. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I hope you all had a good rest. Then, without further ado, let us proceed with the second part of the panel discussion session. I'd like to invite our moderator and panelists up to the stage. We have Mr. Michael Moe, the CEO of GSV Group, as our moderator today. He's now coming up on the stage. Please greet him with a big round of applause. As our panelists, we have Mr. Mitchell Weinstock, the venture partner of HP Tech Ventures, Ms. Sarah Applebaum, the partner of Pangea Ventures. Thank you very much. And we have Mr. Dong-soo Kim, the CEO of LG Technology Ventures. And last but not least, we have Ms. Shelley Rao, the investor of Juniper Networks. Ladies and gentlemen, please greet them again with a big round of applause. Mr. Moe, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning, everybody. Really excited about this discussion. Let's start. Why don't you each give a little bit more of an introduction of yourself and what you're focused on with your job. Mitchell, why don't you go first?
Sure. My name is Mitchell Weinstock. I'm a venture partner at HP Tech Ventures. HP Tech Ventures is a corporate venture capital group. As a typical type of group, we align with the business units, so our job is to go out and find technologies that are interesting to the three large core sections that HP has. It's a large 3D printing group. There's a big print group that makes everything from the latex printers that you see, building printers, Vespa printers, and the things you might find in a Costco. And then there's the business that is known as personal systems. Everything from laptops, displays, Bluetooth printers, Bluetooth speakers, printers, you name it. So that CVC group has to go out and find things for the business units that they can actually use within their company. It's an interesting job, a small team, highly focused on helping them with that job. And we have two basic roles. One is a business development role, find things for them to sell, as well as investing in those companies and trying to help those startups grow. There's nothing better for a startup than a PO from HP to help them with evaluations, and we try to do that as well.
Sarah?
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Sarah Applebaum from Pangea Ventures. We are a traditional corporate venture capital group, but we work with a number of corporations in collaboration, both as investors in our fund, co-investors, and other partners. We are a hard tech focused venture capital firm. And by that, I mean we invest in companies leveraging advancements in material science, chemistry, biology, and biochemistry. We believe that some of the world's most significant problems can really only be solved by science-based hard tech innovations, and you'll see that reflected in our portfolio. The areas that we're most active in today include climate solutions, which encompasses industrial decarbonization, technology supporting the energy transition, sustainability, and circular economy. We're also very large investors in agriculture, plant-based foods, and water treatment technologies. And of course, the environment with which we live impacts the human body. And so we also invest in human health and well-being through investments in point-of-care solutions, diagnostic tools, medical imaging, and similar businesses. We are typically a Series A investor, so we invest in companies whose technologies are out of the lab, there's evidence of product market fit, and they've at least collaborated with one meaningful partner. And we typically invest $4 to $6 million US as our first entry point into a company.
Great. Sue?
Yeah, well, when I chose to become the CEO of Juniper Ventures, it's really an honor to be here. Since management Juniper is a corporate venture capital arm of the group. We're based in Silicon Valley, and we started in May 1st of 2018, so it's been more than 5 years. Currently, we're managing about $680 million of fund assets, and we invest in very broad areas, everything from materials advisors to complex services and things like that. We are Series A or later stage investor, and we really try to provide value to our portfolio companies by trying to help them work with LG.
Shelley?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I work at Juniper Networks, which is a Silicon Valley founded and bred through venture capital, actually. It's a quite legacy success story. For those who don't know, it's a computer networking company who sells all the traditional hardware equipments, components of, the building infrastructure of internet, like switches, Ethernet related products. More recently, we've become more active in software as well, like firewall products, as well as any sort of enterprise-facing AI ops security apps. And more broadly, our themes are, we don't try to silo ourselves into categories. I would say we try to be open-minded and navigate the landscape of Silicon Valley in an agile way. And the way to do that is to almost behave like a startup. We are a CVC. However, I would say that we differ in the ways that we position ourselves. We like to be agile and we can act quick. We can write checks faster than, what I would say the traditional timeline would be for CVCs as well. And so with that said, we're very flexible as well in terms of our check size. We go as early as pre-seed nowadays. That's the trend that we're seeing. CVCs are becoming way more active in earlier stages. And as a result of that, I think there's no rules anymore as far as our venture arm goes. So yeah, happy to be here and happy to trade notes with other CVCs here as well. Thank you.
And maybe it's well known by everybody, but I think it still would be useful if, in your own words, you describe the difference between a CVC and a traditional venture capitalist, and where, and also some of the trends that maybe you're seeing as this market keeps on evolving.
Yeah, maybe I can start as the only non-CVC on the panel. The primary difference for us is we are a financially motivated venture capital fund. And what I mean by that is our number one objective is to drive financial returns for our investors. That's why they back us, fund after fund after fund. And a CVC will also generally be looking for alignment within one or more of their business units and strategic objectives within the company. We work with over 24 corporations as investors across one or more of our funds. Typically, we are working directly with their CVCs as part of that investment, and so can assist them in deal sourcing, following market trends, understanding what's happening in North America in particular. We work with a lot of investors in the Asia Pacific region, Japan and Korea in particular. And then, of course, we co-invest with CVCs. We find that corporates bring a lot of value to the startups within which they invest because they're not only bringing capital, but they're also providing market access, market intelligence, and can really help pull these technologies and these companies through to the market and accelerate revenue ramp, adoption, and help them move into additional geographies as well.
I think one of the things that might not be obvious is that typical VCs want a lot of control. They want to take a board seat. CVCs are not so interested in that. Very often they'll take board observer seats where there's not as much control. They're not taking a voting situation. CVCs are on a spectrum of various different kinds of situations, so that varies between it, but a lot of the CVCs don't do that. You'll also notice that VCs, if you're doing well, will follow on constantly at every one of your milestones. CVCs may not be so good about following on in some cases. If a bad quarter, it may not work out. Sometimes it does, and it's really great. But VCs are really good about building companies, and CVCs are really good about aligning with strategy and helping those business units find ways to move that material through the system.
Well, I think it's a lot more difficult questions as to why these people are VC, because there are many VCs out there, and they all come with all different changing of, let's say, the objectives of, for instance, like here from others. Some are purely strategically driven. There are others that are, like an example, financial, very important conditions, and again, the structure very different. sheet. There are other CVCs who manage a fund. So it's just very complex questions to answer. But I think every time you meet a CVC, that you should really talk about. I should ask questions about how you're structured, what your motivation is, and in addition to the financial investment, what other value can provide.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very complicated question. I think that's where our role becomes very interesting is we have to be creative and we have to stay open-minded in terms of what that alignment is. And in the most recent cases I've seen, especially with the new AI wave, the most intricate or tricky part for a lot of these startups is actually validating the use cases and finding out exactly where the value accrues in the ecosystem and making sure that they're, really going after the right problems with the right customers. So I think with a large corp, you do have a multinational distribution network, and that will help them obviously test and validate some of the use cases with people that are on the ground that are able to provide practical feedback that can really help them reiterate quicker and to avoid failure. Obviously, time is money in a VC or startup type mentality. The less you fail or the faster you fail, the better. And I think having a good corporate partner who can help you facilitate that process is really important.
So, the best startups, there's more capital than they need. So the value-added capital, how do you, either in the role as a CVC or in a traditional VC, what are kind of some of the key things that you try to articulate why your capital is more valuable than the person across the way?
Where we start? So I think when we are engaging with startups, they're really interested in us for scale. I mean, we're interested in the R&D side of it. They've invented something that's interesting. And one of the reasons that maybe we don't follow on later on is that we already know how to do sales. We already know how to do scaling. That's where we really help out. When we're trying to take something and move it to a massive size in multi-languages in multiple countries, there's nobody that can do that probably better than HP.
Would you give just a quick example of when you've done that?
Yeah, we did that with Tile. Tile was running along very nicely with their little pieces. We actually built that into some of our laptops and turned that into a hub, which gave them enormous capabilities to be able to stretch their network in ways that they weren't thinking about when they built their first Tile systems out.
No. Good.
So there are three primary ways that Pangea Ventures differentiates itself from other investors in the VC landscape. The first for entrepreneurs is we are long-term partners. We, as a fund, have been around for over 20 years and consistently have invested in hard tech and climate solution ventures. Hard tech is challenging to build companies, to scale, to commercialize, and get to an exit or a liquidity event. And so we've learned a lot of lessons along the way. And we're not just there to back and support our founders when the market is really good and everything is up and to the right. We're committed to partner with our founders and our companies through market volatility. And we saw a lot of companies and new funds, especially around climate solutions, enter the market in 2020 and 2021. And we're now seeing a pullback in some of that capital. And we want our CEOs and our entrepreneurs to know that we're committed to continue to invest in this category for the long term. So that's number one. The second is around experience and expertise. As a long-term hard tech investor, we have helped many of our companies scale from an N of one installation to 600, 700 sites around the world, to IPO and beyond. And so we can bring those lessons learned, those networks, and those expertise into the boardroom and to help our CEOs. And then the third is access to international markets and corporate partners. As I mentioned before, we work with over 24 corporations as LPs or investors across our funds, and we can bring all of those companies into the boardroom, introduce them to our CEOs within the portfolio. And sometimes those become very beautiful partnerships, customer-supplier relationships, R&D, sometimes co-investor or acquirer. And so those are the three things that we believe differentiate us in the market.
Yeah, for us, obviously, the biggest benefit that we can provide is help the startups to work with LG. Obviously, there are a lot of startups who wants to partner with LG in many ways, but likewise, there are a lot of people within LG who wants to work with startups to drive innovation. And one thing that we can provide is putting the startups in front of the right people within LG. I mean, LG has, I don't know, somewhat like 200,000 people working, and it's really hard to find the right audience for your technology or product. We have a very close relationship with people within LG Tech Ventures. We have a business development team that do come from LG, and they understand who's looking for what kind of technology. So we can usually put the startup in front of the right people. Also, we can coach the startup on how to communicate and talk to people within LG. Obviously, I mean, there's a big difference of culture between a Silicon Valley startup, for example, and somebody working at a giant conglomerate in Korea. And so just try to have the startups understand how to approach them and how to talk to them can also provide value. And third thing that we can do is also during the discussion, we notice there's always a lot of miscommunication at times because of the difference of culture, and that we can go out and try to mediate those miscommunications and try to have each understand the other side and help with the relationship that way. So that's.
So give just one example. The first piece that you said is a differentiator, navigating the complexities of the gigantic LG. What's an example of an investment you made where you're able to do that, and how you efficiently navigate that for the entrepreneur?
Yeah, so first company that comes into my mind is a company called InWorld AI. It's a generative AI company. What the company does is using natural language, you can generate a brain of a character, for example. By brain, you mean like his personality and how he. So there are definitely a lot of companies who can make chatbots for discussion, but we really want that the chatbot to have some kind of personality that you can program. So either being very kind and gentle, or aggressive, or very intellectual, you name it, right? So that can provide more diverse kind of conversations that you can have with using AI. So again, we invested in the company because it really had a very strong founders and very interesting technology. But we realized that that capability can be used in the metaverse also. So U+, our telco affiliate, has developed this Kiss World. What we call Kiss World is a metaverse for children, and within that metaverse, there are a lot of animals, for example, and kids want to go and talk to these different animals. You want to talk to the lion and tiger, and at the end, I mean, obviously, you want to create a chatbot that mimics the personality of those different animals. So a lion should probably be more, forceful and so forth. So they are partnering with InWorld to create all these different characters within the metaverse, and it's we really help the relationship by introducing InWorld to the U+ first, and then also helping with the relationships.
Shelley?
Um,
So specifically, Juniper Networks Ventures, how do you, what's your pitch to differentiate what you guys are doing vis-a-vis others, your competitors?
Ideally, I think we'd like the value to be already clear to them. Those are the type of founders that are usually in our network. But more recently, as we've tried to come up with ways that could reinvigorate our ecosystem, one of the ideas that we're trying to officialize right now is our access to enterprise data. So what Juniper has that is unique is these highly frequent, highly dense location services data that broadly companies like Google or Facebook just don't have access to, is because a lot of it is enclosed within the corp. And so what we're trying to do is to exponentiate our data platform by targeting startups that could have enterprise data use cases through location services APIs. And so that applies to a lot of use cases like IoT, edge compute, even more recently, generative AI based on location services predictions and targeted marketing within a specific enterprise type location like hospitality or more recently hospitality and warehouses. And we kind of follow the trends and the needs of the industries that we see in our customer base, and we try to find use cases that could be mutually beneficial for both and kind of leveraging our own advantage in the meantime. Yeah, so it could get niche-y sometimes.
Yeah, I made the point in my talk that the data shows that 62% of Gen Z wants to be an entrepreneur and do a startup. And I believe the statistic of college students, 65% want to work at a startup. Do you think, one, can entrepreneurship be taught? Or in other words, are entrepreneurs born or are they made? And if they can be taught, what are some of the key things that you look for in a successful entrepreneur?
One of the programs that I've engaged in to help with that is a group called Paragon One out of New York. They actually look at underserved communities of students that are in college that are very interested in both being VCs or entrepreneurs. And they put them through an entire set of classes. And then what we do is we layer on top of that a real assignment. I want you to go scout for hardware encryption that I can use in a printer. Or I want you to give me some customer discovery calls I need for a business unit. So they get a real assignment. And every week I have to go and mentor them and say, hey, this is on target, it's not on target. But what's cool about the program is, unlike an intern program, which I also have at HP to help with this, I don't have to manage the HR, I don't have to manage the icky parts of an intern. So I get 50 kids running out there looking in places I don't have time to look. They learn from me every single week how I think about scouting, how I think about solving the problem, and they get immersed in this particular program. It's really great.
That sounds terrific. You know what the old saying is, you know how much it costs to train a venture capitalist?
$20 million.
About $20 million.
Yeah, if you haven't invested $20 million, you're not there yet.
Yeah.
So I think there are a couple things that are worth noting when talking about entrepreneurship and the desire for students and young people to become an entrepreneur and run their own companies. One is the nature of work has changed. No longer do you work for one company for 35, 40 years and they take care of you with a pension and good benefits and all of those things. You've got to look out for yourself because there's been especially in North America, an erosion of the social safety net. Number two, there's also been a massive glorification of the founder CEO, Zuckerberg, Elon, and others through, feature films and this, I don't know what the right word is, but this idolization of a founder CEO. And if you haven't raised $1 billion or $100 million at $1 billion valuation, that's not successful. And there are, hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs that are running small and medium-sized enterprises that haven't raised a single dollar of outside money that are very successful. And I think, raising venture capital and building, a highly scalable tech company isn't the only way to be an entrepreneur and be successful. Second is around, can you teach entrepreneurship? Yes and no. I think you can provide really valuable education on the fundamentals of business, what it takes to look at a balance sheet, run, a P&L, how to manage people, how to engage with customers and sell, and sort of the nuts and bolts of running a company. But what you can't teach is what's in here, which is the soul and the heart and the grit and the desire to fail, or not the desire to fail, but the desire to be comfortable with ambiguity, the risk of failure, and the tenacity and grit that comes with hearing no 1,000 times from potential customers, from investors, and really having the conviction that you as an individual can create something where previously there was nothing.
I mean, needless to say, being an entrepreneur is a very difficult job. I mean, there's many reasons why, in addition to long hours and a lot of work, but in many cases, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur, there's so much that you need to learn. There's, I mean, you know, when you start a company, you probably have a good vision, and maybe your background is either technical or management, but nobody has all the skill set to become a successful entrepreneur. I mean, fortunately, I mean, there are a lot of resources out there that help you that you should take advantage of, obviously, right? I think Silicon Valley is really good at that. A lot of entrepreneurs get together, discuss their problems, and share their know-how freely. I think that's a good way to learn things. I hope same kind of, I guess, culture of collaboration is established in Korea also. And also there are, you know, many kind of accelerators that can help you with some of the learnings that you need to do to both, you know, just hire the people and manage people and so forth. Your investors can be a very valuable asset also. Please, I mean, I always tell my portfolio companies to come out and just ask any questions you might have, because as an investor, you see many companies and you have a lot more experience on what, you know, what kind of companies succeed and what are some of the things that you have to be careful and watch out for. So again, I mean, all those, the experience can be very valuable. So it's just, you know, if you go out and try to, you know, take advantage of all the resources that are out there, then it'll definitely make your job easier. Also, but having said that, also you gotta, sometimes, you know, you just cannot learn everything. Different entrepreneurs have different skill set, and as Karen said, you know, sometimes you just maybe not, it's not your thing to, you know, start a company and go all the way through the finish line through IPO and all that. You know, maybe you're just more, you know, equipped to just at a very early stage of the startup. But once you realize, wow, this is not, you know, your area, then obviously a good option is to hire a more experienced manager and you take another role in the company. I think that happens a lot more in the U.S., whereas here in Korea, I've seen that happen very rarely. But I think it's very important to know if and when is time to transition to another person to run the company.
So Shelley, are entrepreneurs born or are they made?
Sorry?
Are entrepreneurs born or are they made? And if they can be made, what are the characteristics that you think they can be taught?
I think you guys have brought up all super good points already. I guess speaking from personal experience, since I was more of a startup operator, I still identify myself more as an operator, having spent 5 years building and scaling very early stage startups all the way from C to Series B. The founders that I find the most, I guess, from an employee or partner perspective, the most exhilarating to work for are people that are mission driven. So people that, you know, have a singular focus on achieving the purpose of the startup, and they have unwavering conviction that that is how the world should be. And I think when you have someone who is passionate, not for the wrong reasons, and someone who believes that the world should be a certain way, I think all the rest can be taught or influenced in a way. So I think finding that drive and finding that genuine curiosity to achieve something is very important. Yeah.
So when you look at, you know, in the knowledge economy, and your companies are all technology, human capital driven businesses. How do you think strategically from a corporate VC standpoint about your ability, you know, to invest in companies that help your companies attract, retain, and develop talent? And you're looking at this kind of fourth pillar of the education system, particularly, Sarah, you made the point about all the different careers that a person graduating from college is going to have today. And the number one thing that they value from their corporation is the education and experience they get. So, I mean, from your perspectives, is that register in your, you know, kind of investment themes that you're looking to develop for your respective companies?
Like, you know, going to college and being in a corporate is kind of similar, because you have to build these relationships. Now, if you're in school, you have to have a relationship between the housing department and the people that are giving you classes, because you can't get the classes until you have a place to go. And you have administration that these people inside have to talk to each other and go around the system. That's what executive assistants do. They talk to different parts of the company and they help break through and make things happen. You're learning inside of corporate and how people operate and how they're motivated and how they decide to make decisions based on their KPIs and the bonuses they're going to get. You get to understand how all these mechanisms work. And if you're going in blind and you've never had these experiences, you can't really understand very well why people are doing things the way they happen to do it. So inside of a company, you can learn product marketing, product management, how things get out the door, why they don't get out the door when they're expected to. I think, good judgment comes from a bunch of bad experiences. You don't make them a second time. And if you're going to give up 10 years of your unrecoverable life to this thing that you want to do, having some solid business experiences that are both book learned and physically learned in places like companies that have process. Learning process isn't something that you can get just by finding a startup, but you learn process and why it's important inside corporates.
Yeah, Bellis?
Running a company and doing a startup is very different than working in a corporation. And I think you'll learn vastly more doing a startup, even if you're not the founder, than you will in a corporation, especially at the early stages, seed, pre-seed, where the company might be sub 10 people. And even though you're hired as an engineer, you might be jumping on sales calls or building a website or figuring out, the accounting and the balance sheet. So you get much more exposure to breadth of experience and skill set. On the corporate side, we support 24 corporates at Pangea Ventures. And what we see within our corporate partners is how attractive working on the innovation mandate is for their teams. So often it's part of, the tenure within the organization. You come from a business unit, you spend 2 or 3 years within the CVC, you learn how innovation from outside is adopted within the corporation, how it's sold and communicated to all of the different business units. And then some folks rotate back out and go back into a business unit or into a corporate development role. And so I think it's also really important for corporations to think about entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, so the internal innovation, as part of their own ongoing employee engagement, education. And as you said earlier in your remarks, education doesn't stop the second you graduate from post-secondary education. It really is a lifelong experience and endeavor. And, I'm still learning every day. And I hope I continue to do that until I'm, 100 plus if Time Magazine is right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I second that learning is a lifelong process. You gotta continue to learn. But the big difference is that after college, when you are, either working for a big company and even more so when you're an entrepreneur, is that you really have to think really hard on what to learn and how to learn. Unlike school, where your teacher decides, okay, you're gonna learn this, and we're gonna teach you. It's really up to you to determine what you're gonna learn, and also how much time you're gonna spend learning it. Because although we want to learn as much as we can, we don't have infinite time. So we gotta decide, prioritize what we need to learn first, and how to do it. And then second of all, also, the big difference is that when you're, especially an entrepreneur, you learn by doing things. So when you're in school, you learn through books and reading things. But when you're an entrepreneur, some of these things you just cannot learn unless you just do it yourself and see how it happens, and sometimes make mistakes, and probably that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, again, you guys are all well said. I think that maybe the only thing I would add to that is when corporates filter for potential candidates or startups, it's important to focus less on the content of the education, because I think everyone can learn if they have that willingness to learn, and it's more the aptitude to be adaptable, and also that willingness to be curious. So as you guys have already mentioned, that lifelong learning concept, not as a box to check because you want to be learning, because you're told to learn, but actually you're curious about something and you actually put in the time to be educated on it because it's your curiosity. So I think it's the traits also are important. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I like to say because the world's so dynamic today, you look at this idea of somebody asks you, are you educated? You say, well, it'd be like if I asked you, are you physically fit? You say, oh yeah, for sure, I ran a marathon in 2004. Well, if you hadn't done anything since, it's sort of a ridiculous answer. I think the same is true with learning today. But we have, 6 minutes left. And I have a bunch of questions. So what I'd ask to do is see if you could respond as succinctly as you can to some of the things I'm going to ask you. The first being, talk to all of us about a success that you had in your role as a VC and what you really learned from it. Get specific about the company or kind of what the learning experience was, but just real quickly, and since, Shelley, since you always get the last, you get to start.
I think successes are few. It's mostly failures for me. And I think that's always been my approach to, I guess, any role is to just embrace failure. And that's no different at a CVC. I think, you have every intention to have things done one way, but most likely than not, it won't turn out that way. So I think what I've learned more, because I'm very early, I think still in my career, is to just be able to see the situation from someone else's perspective and being able to reiterate and not give up and just keep pedaling forward. I don't have a specific instance in my mind because I think, I serve the startups that I work with and they're all successful to me in their own ways. But I think that's what I have for this question.
Actually, I always tell my prospective employees, saying the best part of being either a venture capitalist or corporate venture capitalist is that you're learning things constantly, and you learn the most when you talk to the entrepreneurs. At least I feel. Especially when you meet the company for the first time and you're trying to learn the technology. I mean, all entrepreneurs, when they're making a pitch, they're eager to teach you, right? I mean, more the prospective investor knows, more likely they'll invest in your company. So you can ask all sorts of questions about technology or management, all that, and they'll just try to explain as well as they can. And that's I found it really valuable. I learned so many things from many entrepreneurs throughout my career that it's just I'm very grateful to. And then second of all, okay, I just lost my train of thought, but I'll that's a good.
Yeah, jump back in if you remember. So maybe I'll share, something of a more personal anecdote because I agree with everything Dungsu said about, venture capital really is lifelong learning and continuous learning as we engage with entrepreneurs. But on a personal note, I've been working as a VC for over 10 years now, and it is a double-sided marketplace. When you are a non-CVC fund, you need to go out and learn sales and fundraise and bring in new investors. And so that's really a role that I've taken on in the last 2 years. In addition to my investor role of working with startups, it's also fundraising and sales. And that's been a challenge that I've really enjoyed and embraced. And I'm learning a whole heck of a lot about selling that I didn't know before.
I think, success in a VC has a lot to do with learning. I think that this job allows me to see the future. I'm literally getting to see what's going to happen 4 years from now. The nascent startups that we're seeing today will be commercially viable things that will get to the public probably within 4 years. So this job allows you to see what everyone thinks, like, oh, I'm going to buy Google on the first day of the stock. And they think the red herring is the big deal. They have no idea that 10 years before Google went public, all this was going on. So this is a great thing. It's that vision that you get to see that. Now, we have a small team of 5 people. In the 8 years that we've been doing this, we did 20 investments, 60 commercial deals, made business people happy inside the business units. That's amazing success, for a small team looking worldwide, running around the world trying to find the right kind of companies.
So, yeah, and I'm going to skip to a geographic question. So you guys are, three of you are from Silicon Valley. Sarah, you're kind of from Silicon Valley. Vancouver it's close enough. Yeah, you're here in Korea. Do you see this idea that basically talent's everywhere? And look into how you get connected to them. Why are you in Korea? What do you see going on here? How do you think about creating the kind of a global investment strategy? I'll start with you, Sarah. Because you looked
Sure.
away.
So from Silicon Valley North, this is my first time in Seoul, first time in Korea, and I've been absolutely so impressed and blown away by the innovation ecosystem here. We are here, we have a number of Korean partners, big conglomerates and corporations that we work with, both as investors in our fund and co-investors in North American startups. Talent is global, climate, food and agriculture, human health are all global problems. And so, as we heard yesterday, Korean entrepreneurs need to think about the global ecosystem and building for export at some point in time as they look to scale and grow. And so, would love to help any Korean entrepreneurs that are looking at bringing their product, service, solution to North America. If they're a fit for our mandate, happy to have that conversation.
Great.
I think Korea is great because you got an amazing amount of government help. I mean, maybe more so than most of the other countries that are out there. There's a hunger for success that I see from the startups here that isn't necessarily worldwide. And there's a lot of hard tech coming from this area. As a hard tech investor, things, not everybody wants to do sensors and chips and this sort of thing, and HP loves that kind of thing. So finding things that are just not dog walking apps is really interesting, and a lot of the interesting things do come from Korea.
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree. Korea startups, it's really good to see that there's a lot of traction nowadays. I've been here 10 years ago, actually, while I was on exchange, and it's always endearing to come back and see how much has changed in just the course of 10 years. Especially, I noticed that you guys have, Wi-Fi in a pocket. Like, that is crazy. And that's not something that's ever available in North America. And I thought that, wow, like, why can't we, have innovation like this? And I'm sure it's a broader, more complicated problem. But just, seeing how innovation can be reiterated in different ways and have products that are more consumer friendly and that are, from a pricing perspective as well, more reasonable. I think it's always good to see that inspired. Yeah.
So Dong Si, you got the last word.
Yeah, so again, I kind of skipped that question because working for a big Korean company, the question should be, why am I in Silicon Valley? but
Okay,
that's where the center of
you were
innovation
right.
is.
Better question. Go ahead, answer that.
Yeah. So again, that's I really believe that's been traditionally the center of innovation, and there's just innovation culture that is there. Not just people always looking for new next thing, but also the type of collaborative environment between the different entrepreneurs and the investors. All that just really promotes innovation that I think is parallel to none in the world. So, but again, but Silicon Valley is now that culture is expanding, as you know very well, and it's just worldwide. I see a lot of that happening also in Korea. That Korea is becoming more Silicon Valley-like. There's a lot more, just exchange of ideas and thought, and it's demonstrated by the quality of the startups that I see every year. It's been continuously go up. So I'm very excited.
Well, thank you all for a terrific conversation. Please give them a hand. Thank you.
Thank you all for the wonderful and insightful session. You may now return to your seats. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them another big round of applause. Thank you very much. I believe it was a truly meaningful time highlighting the importance of corporate as the fourth pillar of education, because after all, education is a lifelong journey. Ladies and gentlemen, we are only left with one last presentation for the session, and this will be delivered by CEO Mr. Henry Sang, from Innovation Refinery, and he'll be joining us via Zoom. So as soon as the stage is ready, I'd like to invite him to our screen. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we had some latency due to technical issues. Thank you for your understanding and patience. Now we have Mr. Henry Sang, our last presenter, waiting for us via Zoom. He will be presenting on Americanizing your product, doing business research at trade shows. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Can you hear us well?
I can hear you fine. Can you see my slides?
We can't see your slides yet. Yes, we can now. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm very happy to be here. I think it's noon in Seoul, so hopefully you're going to have a good lunch. It's night here in San Francisco. I was asked to give this talk to try to help companies as they attempt to come into the United States. And what I am is a very hands-on tech manager. And so what I'm going to share with you is material and techniques that we developed while actually in big companies, but it's just as applicable for small companies. So let me just get into it. Let's see, how do I advance? It's not advancing. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so, oops, too many. So one of the questions is, I've got success in my home market, say in Korea. Does that translate to be success in the United States? Are you ready to go? Well, you know, that depends, right? You might have something that's a plug compatible thing. Let's say you're making some type of electric part or plumbing piece or something like that, in which case, maybe you just translate the labels or something like that. On the other hand, you could be at the complete opposite end, and something that works in one market doesn't work in the United States at all, right? And there are things like that. And then there's a lot of stuff in between, and that's what we want to talk about. And how do you try to tune it up so that it does work? How do you Americanize the product? So you can see that actually a large part of the spectrum and the speedometer, it needs additional work. More often than not, the use case that worked in Korea is similar, but not the same as the United States. You have to remember, the United States is huge, and things are done different by region. You know, for example, in Korea, you have to grow a lot of tomatoes in greenhouses, whereas in the United States, well, there's another part of the country that's warm enough to grow it in any one season, so you just do it outside. While you think of us as a big country and we've got population, we're still mostly very rural. We have very different types of weather. And there are, I think, 7 main time zones used by the United States. There are 4 major ones, but we've got a lot of time zones. Not as bad as Russia. The other thing, though, we have is, while English is our official language, we are definitely a multilingual and multicultural country, and increasingly so. Immigrants make up a large part of our population, as they always have. But yet we don't have excellent public transit like you have in Korea. We have a lot of space. Public safety is a very different situation. So, you know, there are things that are similar, but they're not the same. Now, the part, though, that I think catches a lot of people by surprise is sometimes you can find extremely different alternate use cases in the US market. And some of these could be highly valuable. They could have high priority. What you want to do is some customer that has a burning desire to buy your product, they have the money, and they want it tomorrow. Those are the types of customers that you'd love to find. So sometimes you can find an opportunity, and it may actually be a bigger opportunity. Other times you might find out, because of the way the US market wants to buy something, there are attached products so you can make more money. So another thing that's kind of critical to understand coming from Korea is, in Korea, technology credibility is kind of the number one thing for a startup company or a product inside of a big company. Whereas that's not so much the case in the United States. The number one thing is customer credibility. Do you really have a problem? Does the customer think you understand their problem and understand the constraints, how they need to buy it, all the other types of things, so that they want to think that you actually really understand them. And in terms of our investors, you'll find a similar type of thing, whether it be a venture capitalist or a CVC. They want to know that you know the customers inside and out, and the customers, trust you. They would love to actually talk to your customers before making an investment. They also are wanting to see that you have really great business skills. You know your numbers. Yeah, in a seed stage, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're going to go for an A round or a B round, you have to be ready to really pass some significant due diligence investigations. They want to see that they know that you know how to use their money to do the right things, and you have the right milestones and checkpoints and ways to fix it. So these are the things that you have to understand coming into the U.S. market for that. Okay, well, how do you Americanize something? Well, the key thing is you have to actually understand how that's going to be used and sold in the U.S. market. The number one thing that people have to understand is you have to have the right vocabulary for the U.S. market. Now, I don't mean exactly a different language per se, but in different industries, you use words differently. You also understand they'll use shorthands and abbreviations for how they describe their business problem or their frameworks or dependencies. Now, of course, the other thing you really need are contacts. Customers, number one, partners, lawyers, experts in the market, things like this. So when you go into the market and you're trying to understand things, you got to find, how do I find the first guy who sold a lot of these types of things in the United States who can introduce me to customers so I can find out more about it? That's one thing to do. But in this talk, we're going to talk about how do you do that also by using trade shows and conferences. And the other thing is to understand the buying ecosystem, because there are a variety of different types of things that need to be addressed beyond exactly your direct customer, because your customer oftentimes depends on other customers. So, or other partners or people that provide input or output. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. Okay, so why do you want to go to, we want to go to trade shows and conferences? Well, there was this bank robber in the United States, and back, 150 years ago. His name was Willie Sutton. And a reporter asked him, Willie, why do you rob banks? And Willie Sutton's answer was, that's where you keep money. And so that's why he robs banks, right? Well, the reason you go to conferences and trade shows is because that's where the right type of people are. Now, this is an important thing. Many times, people coming from abroad, not just Korea, think that the best trade show to go to is CES. And CES is a great show. It's got all kinds of different things, but it may not have the right type of people that you need to talk to. Or if it does, they're one of the million people walking around, and so finding them might be difficult. So you might want to think about it. I would go to a topical trade show. So if you're dealing with something in ag tech, go to an agricultural trade show. If you're going to deal with something in K-12 education, go to education trade shows, because that's where all of the right types of people are. And you get a mix. You got customers, influencers, partners, competition, you got all kinds of people, but you got them all together. It's one of the trade shows are an amazing thing. And what I'm going to show you how to do is to do research on people at the trade shows. Tell you the techniques for doing it, because trade shows and conferences are great. It's one of the few times when your competitors will tell you and everybody else around you what they're trying to do. And you can actually listen in a lot of times on conversations where they are having with customers. It's allowed at a trade show. Okay, the other thing that you might find is you might get really lucky and find one of these other opportunities. Someone brings it up and you go like, whoa, that's really key. I didn't know that. These things happen quite often. Most people just don't pay attention to that. I was just talking to a Korean company today about how they could use their product in a very different area. And it would probably be, 6 times bigger market. They're like, great, but they didn't know about it. So this is an opportunity to actually go out and find these new issues and opportunities. Okay, so let's get ready to start this race. First thing to understand is you have a lot of different types of people there. What I show in this word cloud are the goals that you might have. And you can see it's many goals. One of the top ones is I need to find customer leads. I really want to do that. But I also, if I can find a new use case, that's great. If I can understand the ecosystem or the vocabulary, it's great. Understanding customers' priorities, who's doing the installing, what are their expectations? There's a lot of different things. And you can't go there and expect someone to give you an ordered list of this type of stuff. You're finding, bits and pieces all over the place and sometimes stringing things together. The 3 main groups, though, from your perspective, are customers. And now the customer, when they're going there, they're trying to do different things, like what's new in the market, or what else can I learn about upcoming technologies, things like that. Other booths are there. You probably, we're not saying you have a booth at this. Some of those people will be, potentially direct competitors, could be partners, but they're out there for a good reason. They're there to get customer leads. That's what they want to get. They're there to get customers, sell products if they can. They have to, in order to sell, a lot of times you have to educate people on your product and show off for partners, because they need partners to help them, expand their business. Now, once again, you have your goals. We talked about that before, but you have to understand each of these groups, while they're there for similar things, they all have different goals. Now, I want to talk a little bit about an ecosystem and why this is important. In the middle on this drawing, you see the big blue is your customer. And now is going to be the case that they have inputs from suppliers or partners or some other type of, it could be physical, it could be financial, it could be all kinds. They have inputs. They also have outputs. They sell to customers. They have a reseller system. They have other partners on the outbound. So there's a lot of different groups. And in fact, it's many layers deep, because your customer might have another customer. So there are multiple levels. Going into the United States, and the customer ecosystem, you may find, can be very different from the one that the customer ecosystem is in Korea. So you want to be cognizant of that. It's actually one of those cases where you should evaluate all your assumptions, because if you're making an assumption for something and it turns out to be critically not true, that puts you in great risk of success. So one of the things that when you go to talk to a customer, what you really want to do is to travel and expand throughout their ecosystem to understand, because there can be things that can stop you from selling it. For example, this literally happened. I saw this happen. Customer, some department in this big company, they want to buy your product. It was a good fit for what they needed to do. It looks like they had the skills, they had the budget, everything looks great, except one of their partners was the IT department. And they came back and said, we're super busy, we're doing all these other things, and it's going to be at least 2 years before we can install that change, that new system. Well, 2 years, that just killed the deal, right? So you need to understand, when are their partner problems for your customer that can lead to it. Or another thing could be that I can do this, I can afford it, but this means that it's going to require change in my supplier or one of my partners, and they can't necessarily make those changes right away. Well, once again, that puts your sale at risk. So you have to do it. Now let's get into actually, how do I get that vocabulary, the contacts, and the ecosystem? The first thing to understand is the timing on a trade show. Usually a trade show is together with a conference. It doesn't necessarily open the first day of the conference. Sometimes it's the second day. And the first day of the trade show is the busiest day. And so if you're taking a look at crowd size, you're going to see something like this. And the first thing you note is that day after day, it gets smaller, right? A lot of people, disappear by day 3 and day 4. You also notice that not all times are equal. There's a time, for example, lunchtime. So it's typically going to be 12 to 2 o'clock when it's lower. But there are peaks and valleys throughout this. Now, this is important because I'm going to talk to you about 2 different ways you're going to do research. You're going to do experiments in this. One is fishing and one is hunting. So, and I know a lot of people in Korea like fishing. I've seen tons of fishermen in Korea. I haven't yet seen anyone catch a fish, but I've seen a lot of fishing. So when you go fishing, you don't know what you're going to catch, right? It's an unknown. You're throwing the bait out there. You're throwing the net. Hopefully something's going to be there and you're going to catch it, but you don't know what it is. But it's okay because you're just, trying to get lucky on this. So with fishing, one of the key things you want to do is learn how to sound like the customer. So this is the vocabulary part. You want to find some contacts. You want to understand why they're thinking about stuff and how they describe what they're doing, what things they say they absolutely need, what things they can't have. And you don't know this necessarily for the US market. So you have to learn it from them. And then you also would like to understand how the competition or potential partners position themselves. How do they talk about it? Because they're already in this market longer than you, at least. And so you want to learn from them what do they work and what doesn't work and what do people push back on. So the first 2 days are really important with this because when it's very crowded, typically you're going to get more chances to meet people and also to listen in. So think about what happens. You're there, everybody's pushing together. You go around the conference very quickly and you find booths of other companies, competitors or partner things that are related to your industry that you're after or your product. And you want to learn from them. So you want to find out who they are. And you go and find one of these booths that has a lot of people pushing up. Now, a typical booth will have a table, a salesperson is standing behind it, a marketing person standing behind it, and you and a whole bunch of other people are standing on the front of it. And somebody's asking them questions. Look for the ones that are having a really strong conversation. It's very active and they're loud and stuff like that. And just stand up there with them like you want to talk to the vendor too. And you can listen. It is legal, it is ethical to listen doing this. And this is one of those few times you could do it. And the customer might be asking them about various details or talking about how would this work? I had this issue. What about financing? What about integration with this other software system? I need this to work in with Salesforce.com, or I've got these regulatory. You can listen in. And here's some key thing. You must take notes. Now, it's generally not okay to take pictures or video. If you had one of those things where you have audio to text, maybe that's okay. It's kind of a gray area. But you want to capture a lot of information that's being said. So at least have a notebook and be taking notes. And have some codes for what is a constraint, what's an issue, what are some of the other things, and capture what these people are talking about. It's very important to do this, as you're going to see. If you hear words and stuff like that, write them in the margins. Learn how to talk like they're talking. And you can even go into some of the booths that may have a bigger booth and they're doing presentations like at a stage on what they're doing. Go sit down and do this. But if you find someone having one of those great conversations and it appears that the customer really knows what they're talking about, they seem to be a senior person, they seem to be, perhaps an executive or directly an operations person, and they know a lot, then you want to go and follow them. So that person stops talking to the thing and they turn and they leave the booth. You might follow after them shortly and go and introduce yourself. Okay. Now they don't know you, you don't know them, but what you want to do is this is where those notes come in handy. You go up to them and say, look, I'm super impressed by you. You know, you really understand this. You're an expert in these areas, and I'm trying to learn some stuff about it. You said, and then you list off 2 or 3 things they said. You said that, you know, this has got to be this way, or this got to be like that, or, you know, that we need to have these types of regulatory things dealt with. And I think I'd really like to understand a little bit more about those things. In fact, I have a question. If you can come up with a good question, ask it at that point. And they will a lot of times they will stop and talk with you. The key thing though is if you can recite something that they said, that's an absolutely key thing, because when you paid attention to them and you echoed back what you heard, 2 things happen. First of all, oh, this guy paid attention. And he paid attention and he said something I said. So obviously, anybody that pays attention to me goes up in my book. They're a better person, right? They're smarter, right? They listen to me. So that's why they got to be smart. And, but, you know, people are really busy and they're probably rushing off. They might have friends who say, like, look, I tell you what, I have a bunch of questions. Can I have a follow-up with you in a few weeks? And notice I said a few weeks. I'm not saying tomorrow, a few weeks. And you hand them your card, okay? And you ask, could I get your card? And half of the time or more, since you show them respect and paid attention to them, they will give you their card. They will give you their card. And so now you have an opportunity for a good contact. Anything else they said during that, when you stopped and asked them about it, write down notes on that, okay? And then you can even ask, who else did you recommend that I go look at while we're at this? And they'll say, oh, go over this booth over here. But let them go away. Now, how do you do the contact? Do not call them right away. If you are going away to a conference and you're a manager, an executive, you're gone for a few days, your email is filled with hundreds of messages, you missed a bunch of meetings, and now you have to play catch up. So it's going to take you at least a week and a half to recover from being gone for most of a week. So what you need them to do is get through that, get caught up, not be rushed. And then you want them in about 3 weeks or 4 weeks to get an email. You want to send them an email. Once again, you want to be very polite about it. And you want to say, you know, remind them, I met you at this conference. You were asking these questions at the Penn Ventures booth. And I was really impressed because you said A, B, and C. You list out the 3 things that they said, they talked about. And you say, you know, I think these are real important for me. I need to learn about them. I have a few questions. You might list a few of the questions, but, you know, be best probably if we just talked on the phone or a Zoom meeting, or can I take you to lunch and talk about it? Now, once again, they won't remember who you are. You know, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, they were rushed. They met a lot of people. They probably don't remember who you are unless you had like green hair or something like that, right? Carrying a bunny rabbit. You know, they're probably not going to remember you. And I don't recommend having green hair or carrying a bunny rabbit, these things, because they look at you and say you're weird. But if you, once again, remind them of the topics that were discussed, and you use the terminology and the types of words that they use, and in the context they used it, once again, they say like, you know, I don't remember this guy, Henry, but, you know, I'm pretty sure I did say that. And so I'll talk to this guy because he's paid attention. Once again, by showing that you pay attention, they will talk to you. And this is a critical thing because you're not going to get all of the information out of them in one time. You need to have an ongoing set of conversations with them. You need them to introduce you to other people who can help you even more so you can map out their ecosystem or talk about different things. Because most people have been in a more senior position, know people in a lot of other companies that are doing similar things to they are. Maybe they worked in those companies, and these people can be a source of great introductions. And it might not be exactly if they're the right person. They say, like, look, I know about this, but I got this guy, Henry, that works for me, and he knows a lot about it. Let me set you up with him. So that's the important thing. Another thing I caution you not to do, if you're trying to learn, please don't try to sell your product. This is not the time to do that. This is the time to show them respect, get information, and get more contacts and opportunities to talk with them again. Now, it's not just trade shows, by the way. In the conference sessions, you might go to some of the conference sessions on the first day or some of the other days, right? It's a good place to, after you've been on the trade show, to just sit down for a while because your feet and your back hurt. Look for the sessions that have a survey talk. Usually it's the first talk of the session. It might be a keynote. And they're talking about all the changes that have happened in the last year in this particular area, the new types of products that come out, and advances and things that they think will happen. And those are good. Also, you might find one of your competitors is giving a talk on some new application they had for their product. Very educational, right? Once again, take a lot of notes. Figure out who's done things. Also look at people who are asking questions. Okay. Now, at the end of a talk, typically the speaker will go to the back of the room. And what happens then is people from the audience get up and they go to the back of the room to ask the speaker questions. So you can go back there and you can meet with them. They will typically have their cards ready. And you can give them your card, talk about stuff. But once again, they're probably going to be swamped. If they're swamped, don't try to push it too much. Just try to get their card. But you've taken plenty of notes. You can do the 3-week thing again. So there are a lot of different things that you can go. Oh, one of the other things is quite often, there will be 1 or 2 people in the audience that ask some really good questions of the speaker. Those people are also good targets. So you might want to follow one of them out and say, hey, do the same thing. Hey, I heard your question. You asked this question. And it says, what else were you thinking about when you asked that question? And they'll come and say, look, I'm in a hurry. You do the card exchange thing and you do the 3-week contact. So that's how you went fishing, just to find some contacts. Now, if you start to look at the later part of the market, of the thing, now you want to start to consider going hunting for partners. So what does that mean? Well, when the crowds have gotten thin, then it looks like in this picture, there's just not a lot of people around. Most people in the booth are sitting around. It's probably day 3 or 4. If you've ever been in a booth on day 3, your brain is it's all fuzzy because you don't remember half the people you talk to. You're bored, you're tired. You may have been out partying last night, so it's tough. But this is a great time to go out and find system integrators and installers and other partners. So what you want to do is go back to them. And if you heard them talking with someone before, go back and say, hey, look, I heard you guys or one of the guys in this booth talk to a customer about A and B, and they said they're going to do this. Could you explain that to me a little bit more? And some of them will talk to you to say, hey, is your product manager for that or your CTO available? And a lot of times they're not, they're busy, but sometimes they'll have the cards for their CTO or product manager. Now, once again, it's a really good time to gather information. When they are talking with you, you are taking notes again. You're getting people's names. Hey, Joe Smith at this, you're talking to me. Joe, it's great to meet with you. Now, let me ask you some of these questions because you can use that information later. When you're going hunting for very specific people, you might be looking to hire an employee. You might be looking for someone who can help you do business development. You might be looking for a contractor. And so you can look for various people that can help your company. Now, when you come to the United States, if you're going to form a company in the United States and go for it, you need to have people that can do these things. And they don't necessarily have to be full-time. They could be a contractor. They could be a consultant. What you have to do is find who can help you. So you go out there, you talk about their products and services, you meet somebody that's good, say, wow, you know a lot about this. How long have you been in this industry? You take opportunities to write this stuff down. Now, if it's a partner company, potentially, you can ask them, hey, are you interested in a new, vacuum cleaner or whatever you're manufacturing? And they'll say like, well, we're not really sure. You should be talking to the product manager or CTO. That's when you ask them for their cards. You can ask them, well, what types of things do you sell? What do you install? How do you do this? What's the typical process that you use? What types of customers do you guys like to go after? And a lot of them will tell you things, right? They'll want to know, are you a competitor? And you should tell them, I'm trying to investigate this market. I don't have a product on the market right now. I don't know if I'm a partner with you or a competitor, or if I'm even going to do this market. They're like, okay, some of them will tell you to go away. That happens. But a lot of them will actually let you talk. And especially if you can come back to some of them and you can say like, hey, remember that guy that was talking to you the other day? What a funny guy that was. And they're going to chuckle. Yeah, that was really weird, wasn't it? So go hunting in these booths. And I oftentimes go to look for employees or contractors. So when you find one of these people and they seem like they really know what they're doing, say, you don't happen to be looking, do you, for a new job? And you don't want to ask this in front of everybody there because it's embarrassing. They're going to have to say no. But a lot of times they'll say, yeah, not really. But I say, well, you want to give me your card? And just in case, let me give you my card. And you give me your card. And just in case, something comes up, let me know because things happen. Or you say, like, do you have any buddies that are really good in this area too? Could you, if any of them are available? And they'll say, like, oh, yeah. Actually, you know somebody who's probably going to move on or they want to move to a different location. So you do this. Oh, here, let me give you a card and an extra card. Can you give this to them or make us an introduction via email? And I like to talk to them. So they can do all kinds of things. One of the things they can give you is opinions about a lot of stuff. But once again, try not to talk about your product because this is all about getting them to talk. Okay, so to kind of recap, you're going to go to when the trade show is near empty to go hunting. You're going to find those vendors that have interesting potential overlaps in terms of partnering or being a system integrator or a reseller or a competitor. And you want to find who in their booth might be able to help you and ask them for, the opportunities to meet the product manager or the CTO or CEO and ask for the business cards if they're not there. Once again, they're very tired. They won't remember you. So take all of those notes to prove you actually talked to them. I can tell you that, I've had people contact me and say like, I talked to John Holtzimer in your booth and he mentioned you weren't there, but he mentioned that this and this problem were something you all were looking at and you were looking for a solution that might be able to fill it. And I think we might be able to help there, but I need to know more about your problem. And now I'm there and I'm sitting there and as a product manager, I'm saying like, yeah, I know John Holtzimer was there. Okay, got that. And he would say stuff like this. So this guy looks legitimate to me. This is back again, it's your notes and all you're paying attention is going to greatly increase your credibility here. And the more you can use the type of language, the type of words, and the context they're using, the greater you're going to be able to do this. Once again, take those 3 weeks to follow up because people are tired going home. So now, how do we fine tune this? We're getting to the end right now. So the very first message is be a nice guy. Use your opportunity to just have a conversation with other people. Become a witness. And I'm using that word witness. You are witnessing conversations with customers. Get their cards, get the notes, try to get a quotation. A quotation is wonderful. You can ask qualifying questions. Excuse me, did you mean this or that? Or could you give me an example? And those types of things are fine. don't object. Don't push back. Don't say no unless you really, really strongly want to say no to something, right? Watch the demonstrations, watch how they position themselves, see who else is in their ecosystem, who else is in their booth, who do they talk with, how they go, and start to say like, oh, how do you get installed this? How do you do this? What do you do when you have to remove old equipment? Who takes care of that? You know, you can ask these things. A lot of times they'll tell you. War stories and success stories are great. So when you're talking to somebody and you hear them say, oh my God, this went bad this way. This is a typical war story. You want to sit there and you want to listen to that and you want to jot it down. And because war stories are another thing you can go up to ask people and say, you know, you were telling me about this disaster that happened and it was something like this. Well, what's the story behind that? And people like to tell war stories or success stories. They just do. It's like it's fun, right? So you know, those things will also do it. Now, there's another thing that I mentioned here in red. Remember at around 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock, there's a dip in the number of attendees because people are going to lunch. Now, if you're lucky, you can leave and find a good restaurant. But a lot of times you're just pushed for time. And so they're selling food at the back of the trade show hall. And it's expensive and really terrible food, you know, really bad for you food, you know, like really salty hamburgers or something, pizza, something like that. And it costs 3 times as much as it should, even for a good one. But that's where it is. You go back there and they have a bunch of large round tables that can hold 10 to 12 people. And you're going to just find one that's got a spot with a bunch of other people and sit down and start eating your lunch. But listen to the conversations that are going around the table, or see someone and, you know, if somebody looks up, asks, hey, you know, what do you think about the trade show? You know, what have you seen that's really cool? And when you ask one person at the table, half of the other people will look up and listen, right? And so they say, what was really cool is, I guess, like, do you think that was a big change? Like, well, why do you think it's really cool? And they'll explain it a little bit. And some of the other people might start talking. And then when you do that, you can look at one of the other ones and say, what do you guys see? Are you seeing something really nice? You know, which booth do you recommend? And a couple of them will always have, oh, I recommend you go take a look at this and look at that. And these people are potential customers. You can ask them questions. Well, why do you think that's the case? Or how was it done before? Who's their competitor? You know, why is that? That's fine. Now, here's where you need to have your elevator pitch. You want to have a 15-second or a 30-second pitch ready to talk about your new co. But once again, you're not trying to promote yourself. You're just like, they'll ask, well, what do you do, Henry? And you're going to have to tell them that. So it's a funny time. I can't tell you how many times sitting around those big tables, not knowing anyone, I managed to meet a few people that were interesting to follow up with. You just get lucky. You know, if you spend the time to actually cultivate and network, then you can do it. And the lunch table is also a networking event. Okay, so let's look at what you're trying to gather again. This is from that word cloud from before. You got all this customer stuff, the vocabulary, the context and stuff, the use cases, who are the other customer groups? There are all these types of things. You might be looking for future employees or installers or integrators. So there's a lot of stuff you're trying to get. And you're not going to get it all. And what you do get is going to be a lot of one thing and almost nothing of something else. Try, though, to keep this type of list available. And as you go through it, check off and say, oh, yeah, I heard a war story. What was it? Write it down. You will forget. Now, what should you avoid doing? Don't be a jerk. Don't be the guy that argues with people. If you want to take a picture of something, ask them, can I take a picture? A lot of times they'll say no, or you can take a picture of this, or I can take the picture, but you do it. Don't preach to them. Don't tell them you got to do this, and this, and here's why, yeah. You know, they're smart people too. but you can ask clarifying questions. If you're with a competitor's booth, please do not contradict them. That's wrong. You're at their booth. Okay. You can ask a clarifying question again, but as such as, oh, so you're saying this, would it also apply to this other area like this? Then they can answer. That's okay. You don't have to contradict them and say like, no, there's this other thing, it won't work. But you can say like, what about this? Is it do that too? And they may say, oh, actually, no, that's different. Let me do it. So that's great, but show them respect. And if they're talking to a customer, do not try to interfere with their customer engagement. You can do some gentle things. If the customer asked a question and this guy didn't answer it the right way, or you think they kind of didn't understand it, you can, if you're in there close and it's appropriate, you can say, I think that she meant this. You tell it to the vendor. Say, I think she meant this, not what you said. I think there's a misunderstanding here. And then you look to the customer and say, did I get it right, or did he really nail it? And a lot of times then you're a helper, right? And a lot of times the customer will look at you and say, yeah, you're closer. This is what I meant. And now you didn't, you were the helper, so it's not interfering. So that's great. So as I say, look for the contacts, look for the ecosystem, look for the vocabulary, understand the context, and be a nice guy. So that's what I've got. I'd be happy to answer questions if you should have them. So let me stop the share so I can see if there are any questions.
Thank you very much,
thank
Mr.
you.
Sang. Thank you very much, Mr. Sang, for your wonderful presentation. We loved every part of your presentation, including the last bit of do's and don'ts. I believe that they were very valuable tips. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, please give our gentleman a big round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, now this wraps up the Penn Corporate Innovation Summit 2023. Up next is prepared TryEverything 2023 Kyowon Deep Change Startup Prize Demo Day. We look forward to your active participation and interest. Thank you for being here with us until the very end.